So the last topic for Political Science 100 is normative theory. Normative theory is one of the most traditional approaches to political science. Previous empirical approaches discussed in the course focus on what is, but political science is also about what ought to be or what should be, or about the normative issues. The latter is in the realm of normative theory in political analysis. So here we discuss ideas such as liberty, equality, community, among others. Being one of the oldest approaches in political science, this approach originates from the philosophical tradition of political analysis dating back to ancient Greece. This involved a preoccupation with essentially ethical, prescriptive, or normative questions, reflecting a concern with what should, ought, or must be brought about, rather than with what is. You have met these questions when we discussed theories of the state that address normative questions such as why should people obey the state, how should rewards be distributed, and what should the limits of individual freedom be, and what is the best form of government. Contemporary political theory deals with similar questions or debates over justice, liberty of individuals, equality, and community, among others. Some more questions that contemporary political theorists using normative theory ask are the following. To what extent should liberal states adopt policies geared to material redistribution? Should the state legislate for morals? How should liberals respond to illiberal beliefs? For this lecture, we will be tackling liberalism, its main assumptions and main thinkers, as well as the main critiques to this theory. As normative theory, liberalism encompasses political theorists' ideas on liberty and equality. It characterizes individuals as rational beings who aim to pursue the good as he or she or they fit, as they are capable of making moral decisions on their own. Its critics, however, focus on the nuances of liberalism's assumptions and focus on community, highlighting that individuals' moral decisions are necessarily influenced by context. They also argue that the liberal promise is hollow and disempowering. Remember what normative theory focuses on: what ought to be. Liberals and their critics discuss what ought to be the shape of the government and the role of individuals in a political system or society. They also have assumptions of what individuals are in the society in terms of their moral worth through their discussions of equality. The implications of these to political theory is the scope of normative theory in political analysis. Liberalism in its essence is an ideology. Particularly, it is the ideology of the industrialized West that guides both capitalism and democracy. Its classical form can be considered a political doctrine. John Locke, one of the earliest liberals, attacked absolutism and feudal privilege, instead advocating constitutional and later representative government. So in the VLE, we have posted videos on primers on liberalism. So what you can see there are these key ideas. So this is from Haywood 2013. So first is individualism. So the core principle of liberalism is the supreme importance of the human individual as opposed to any social group or collective body. The liberal goal is to construct a society within which individuals can flourish and develop, each pursuing the good as he or she defines it to the best of his or her abilities. Liberalism is morally neutral as it believes that individuals make their own moral decisions. So this follows that the state should not presume that it knows what the individual needs and what an individual needs to flourish and develop. If you also remember our discussion on liberal feminism, that they want women to be able to choose what they want to their own lives and to their own bodies. So that is one of the key tenets of liberalism. Second is freedom. So liberalism's core value is freedom, or the ability of one to act how he or she pleases or chooses. So there's also this idea of freedom under the law, that it's ideal that individuals should enjoy the maximum possible liberty consistent with a like liberty of all, for all. And then third is reason. ability of individuals. This is the ability of individuals to be the best judges of their own interests, related to number one, individualism. So if you also remember the rational part in rational choice theory, that is also what liberalism is referring to in highlighting reason as one of its key ideas. Lastly is equality. So there are different kinds of equality. You have foundational equality. Liberals believe that individuals are born equal, at least in terms of moral worth. Like, ever since you are born, you are equal with other people. Next is legal equality, which is equality before the law. Next is political equality. One person, one vote, one value, which is the idea behind representative elections. And then equality of opportunity, a level playing field that gives individuals an equal chance to realize their unequal potential. So all of this you will be able to discuss in this presentation. More ideas of liberalism is the fifth is toleration. Now, so liberalism adheres to pluralism and believes that there should be balance or natural harmony between rival views and interests. So it knows that there are many interests, so these interests should all be considered, and there should be a balance or natural harmony between and among them. Sixth is consent. So government, according to liberals, should be based on the consent of the governed. Liberal democracy is in favor of representation, as authority is always grounded in legitimacy. So your lectures and the state would help you understand this specific idea of consent. Now, so in the social contract, for example, that people are being allowed, there is a state because people allowed that to kind of exist. So that's one liberal idea also. And then lastly is constitutionalism. So you have a government, but this government is a limited government. Okay, because there is the tendency that this government may become a tyranny against the individual. So this also makes sense, as liberalism is also a kind of reaction to a previous forms of government, such as, for example, a while ago I mentioned Locke and his response to absolutism. So constitutionalism is like a check. Constitutions are checks to government, so that they won't abuse citizens, because that is still a possibility according to liberals. And so you have these stages or kinds of liberalism based on the historical period where they appeared, or where they appeared. So first is classical liberalism. So this was in the 19th century. So classical liberalism has commitment to an extreme form of individualism. So it has an unsympathetic attitude towards government intervention. So a while ago we said that in the key ideas of individualism and constitutionalism, there's this idea that the government is inherently bad, in the sense that you need to limit it, and that in individualism, as an idea of liberalism, it says that your government does not have the authority to make people's decisions for themselves. So it will have that authority when people legitimize it. All right. So classical liberalism is the extreme in terms of its skepticism against the government, because it says that you need not have like the government is just there. It's necessary evil. So the classical liberalism also has this idea of negative freedom, where freedom, all people have freedom, but this freedom is essentially based on non-interference. Like the government is just there and will not interfere with what people want. So it's also favoring laissez-faire capitalism, It guarantees prosperity, upholds individual liberty, and as this allows individuals to rise and fall according to merit, ensuring social justice. So, when you say it like this, you have the government as a necessary evil, that it does not interfere specifically in the economy, and you let the market work on its own. People interact in the market and in the country. So yeah, so a very very small government. And then there was a shift in the 20th century in modern liberalism, where now it supports big government as it recognizes the injustices and inequality generated by classical liberalism. Because when you look at it like that, you just leave people in classical liberalism. You just leave people to fend for themselves without the intervention of the government that could have powers to alleviate, for example, poverty, or institute some social arrangements that could be better for the lives of most people. So it recognizes those injustices and inequality that is generated by classical liberal governments or systems. So it emphasizes positive freedom, which is the personal development and flourishing of the individual. So you heard that a while ago when we discussed freedom and individualism. So ito yung sinasabi na idea of people choosing what is best for themselves and what they think is best for their lives. So modern liberalism is also related to social and or welfare liberalism, as it recognizes that state intervention, particularly in the form of social welfare, can enlarge liberty by safeguarding individuals from the social evils that blight individual existence. So it's saying that when the government supports individuals to do what they think is good for them, and to do what is good for them, then they could give a kind of freedom to them. Yeah, they could enlarge the liberty of these individuals from, for example, from extreme poverty, from conflict, etc. So modern liberalism adheres to Keynesian economics, where they believe that growth and prosperity could be maintained only through a system of managed or regulated capitalism, with key economic responsibilities being placed in the hands of the state. So you see here how it's different with classical liberalism, as it now believes that the state or the government is very much important in the workings of the economy. So there are things that the state, the government can do that if it does not do would lead to further inequality and injustices. So those are the major differences between these two kinds of liberalism. John Rawls' A Theory of Justice is the most influential modern attempt to reconcile the principles of liberalism with the politics of redistribution. This was at the height of liberals' realization that liberalism in its present form has produced inequalities, and thus state intervention is desirable if the goal is to raise individuals to the point where they are able, once again, to take responsibility for their own circumstances and make their own moral choices. So Rawls' theory starts with the individual. He notes that individuals are free and rational persons and are self-interested, consistent with liberal theory. He, however, notes that it is because of these characteristics of individuals that they can form a well-ordered society, where there is a public or common conception of justice that would guide the making of institutions in the society or its basic structure. He argues that at the present, we have different ideas of justice, and this has implications on the kind of society that we have. Rawls also recognizes that the present society is highly unequal in terms of distribution of goods. Like, for example, some people are born rich, and so have a better starting point than other people who may be born poor. The current state of the world, where some billionaires possess money and wealth worth the wealth of several small countries, can also be an example. As people live in a free market, consistent with liberalism, these people who had more wealth, intelligence, or beauty, for example, reap the rewards for their own, making them more advantaged and making the gap between them and the disadvantaged wider. This inequality is an obstacle to having a truly just society where everyone benefits from the system and no one is unjustly poor. Rawls then envisions a kind of social contract where people or individuals are in the original position of equality. This is because there is a need to rethink the present system. In the original position, people are under the veil of ignorance. They do not know their background or their starting positions, whether they are wealthy or poor, intelligent or not, and are tasked to decide upon the structure of a society designed to advance the good of all its members. This means that they decide a common conception of justice that everyone will adhere to and will be the basis for social institutions. So note that the original position of equality and this social contract that Rawls is discussing is a kind of thought experiment. So it's not an actual meeting between people because it's basically impossible to have a veil of ignorance. But essentially what Rawls is saying is that for us to be to forward as a society, we need to rethink we need to have one conception of justice that would apply to all of us. And with that, we need to break from or forget in a way where we came from, because we are very unequal in the sense that all of us were born unequally. Some have more benefits than others, like wealth, beauty, etc. So for us to arrive at a position where we have a more equal society, we need to be in this original position of equality. So why does Rawls insist on the original position of equality? Liberalism in particular favors a level playing field or equality of opportunity, but this can be even thwarted in a society that favors values such as wealth or beauty or intelligence. The original position tries to do away with these especially deep inequalities, or at least take away people's knowledge about them, so that when they decide, they will take into consideration of questions like, what if I was really poor? This would be factored in the discussion of the distribution of rights and duties once the liberation from the original position of equality is done. So as a social contract, the process looks like this. First, people in the original position decide upon the structure of the society. There will be an agreement. They will define terms of association or cooperation, like how will people in their envisioned society cooperate with one another? How is life there? Rawls argues that this agreement is fair, and is fair because everyone is in the original position of equality with no knowledge of their actual position in the society. Then, their agreed upon principles of justice will then regulate future agreements regarding, for example, redistribution of wealth. This could go as far as the contract establishing a government or a society where the principles of justice still hold or take effect. According to Rawls, people will agree upon the following in the contract. First, that everybody is equal in terms of the basic assignment of rights and duties. So we will eventually say that everyone should be equal, and that there will be social and economic equality through the difference principle. So what is the difference principle? So the difference principle according to Rawls. So Rawls said that since it is not easy to get rid of inequalities in the real world, people will decide that it could be permissible only if they work in favor of the disadvantaged in the society. Meaning, we will allow inequalities as long as they work in favor of the disadvantaged in the society. So how does that work? If individuals have different starting points and there is no level playing field for everyone, then the society formed and designed by people in the original position should help those who are disadvantaged in the society. For example, poor people will be helped by the society or the government through people's taxes. While we are permitting that billionaires and wealthy people could exist, it should be the case that taxes from these wealthy people go to the government for them to redistribute to the poor and disadvantaged people. If before, people with exceptional wealth, talent, beauty, and intelligence benefit from the rewards as such for their own benefit, now these rewards are considered as belonging to the community as a whole. If you are exceptionally wealthy, beautiful, or intelligent, as these are benefits you reap from the free market that values these over other values, then the benefits you get should be redistributed as according to the difference principle. Inequality should work in favor of the disadvantaged in the society. So this may seem simple, but other theorists would say that redistributing wealth violates freedom of people to choose what is good for themselves. Like people asking why should billionaires be taxed differently than everyone. Like other people would argue that pinaghirapan naman yan. No, but for this difference principle, it's advocating for that. So another approach, the libertarianism. The libertarians, they say libertarians are all for freedom of people. Sila yung talagang nagsasabi na we should not legislate for morals, or we should not legislate for people, or the government should not decide for people. So what they say about this is that people should be left alone to decide for themselves, and thus the government should not force them to pay taxes so that wealth can be redistributed to the less fortunate. This is what Rawls was reconciling in his theory: the classical liberal view that people are free and independent, self-interested, and the modern liberal view that there should be more government intervention, specifically in redistribution. His was a normative theory dealing with questions of justice, liberty, equality, and community. So you have on one hand the classical liberalism that has produced inequalities, saying that people are free, but people are essentially also free to exploit others, like others who are more intelligent, more beautiful, more wealthy, since they were born, have an equal advantage. Like for example, a person who is wealthy could, for example, go to a very good school at first, for example, in his or her primary or secondary school, that would then later on be an advantage when he or she goes to college. And then when you go to a prestigious university, then you could have a good paying job, or if your family has a company of their own, then you could also have a job at that company or eventually own that company. So that is not a privilege that is accorded to everyone. So that's what Rawls is saying. We have different starting points in life. So that's why he proposed this theory so that we could rearrange or rethink our social institutions that basically allow that to happen. Allow the existence of billionaires to happen in the face of extreme poverty in the world. So sabi niya, so we can fix this. We can go back to the original position of equality and shed off these biases and inequalities that we have. And when we shed off these biases, for example, we will start to think about all the classes, or all the economic classes, social classes, and decide for the benefit of everyone. So that's how the difference principle was formulated. That yes, we will allow inequality. Like you can be much more richer than other people, but you should allow the government to redistribute your wealth, because inequality should exist only for the benefit of the disadvantage of the society. So you can see how this is very non-practical in the real world. So of course there will be critiques to liberalism, as liberalism notions of what ought to be is not accepted by all political and social theorists. So one critique to liberalism is that it is an ideology that is hollow and disempowering. So in general, critical theory jumps off from Marx's critique of the society. Since the proletarian revolution failed to materialize, critical theorists, beginning from the Frankfurt School in 1923, started to rethink their analysis and the analysis of Marx, and provide a different perspective on capitalism and the dominant ideology of liberalism. Liberalism, for critical theorists, is a central element in the ideological edifice of capitalism. So, for them, liberalism and capitalism goes hand in hand. The idea of self-interest as an autonomous, instrumental, rational pursuit, with every individual competing in a free market, naturalizes and legitimizes a system of exploitation, contrary to the liberal promise of freedom to choose one's own moral pursuit. Liberalism pervades the lives of individuals and makes them dependent on the system. This is how the liberal promise could be hollow and disempowering. Herbert Marcuse, in particular, discusses this tendency of liberalism to suppress anything that is not contributory to efficiency of production or non-material instincts like creativity. These are repressed in a liberal system. He thus forwards the theory of the return of the repressed, or the reassertion of our instinctual need for sensuous and aesthetic gratification. Communitarianism is also a normative theory that critiques liberalism, especially with its focus on the rationality of the individual. Theorists of communitarianism believe that the good life can be achieved within a well-functioning society that government must help create. They insist on the importance of the context or the community in the development of an individual's rationality as well as his or her identity. So, theories of communitarianism believe that a political structure, or the government, for example, has an important role to play in defining both the right and the good, and in helping those people in that political structure to seek the good. Communitarianism critiques Rawls' ideas as people were reduced to self-interest. They argue that the rationality of the people in the original position, for example, are influenced by their context, like the community they belong to. These communities could be religious, ethnic, national, or and others. And this should not be dismissed altogether. Yung sinasabi ko kanina that the original position is unpractical and also unrealistic because you cannot decide. Decisions are made, political decisions are made, for example, with consideration of one's own context also. So we have seen this in institutionalism, right? And institutionalism, and also in Marxism. Right? So for communitarianism, it's almost the same. We cannot dismiss this. So for them, the community has a huge role in constituting the common identity of individuals and conferring upon them common beliefs. Context is thus important toward a socially informed liberalism. So that idea is supported by Michael Sandel by saying that moral consensus based upon a recognition that how individuals construe themselves and so what is normatively compelling for them depends upon the norms and conventions of the community to which they belong. So as you see here, this is very much against individualism. Because individualism is just, as per liberalism, is just knowing and pursuing what you want as an individual want. But it is also a reality that people are compelled by beliefs, by values that they learn through their communities. So this is very important for government, according to scholars of communitarianism. Walzer also argues that moral choice is situated, meaning that our ideas of good depend on the shared meanings that we share with people in our community, culture, or people who have the same language. Language, in particular, is the locus of these shared meanings, as it is through this that we understand the world, structure our experience, and order our values and priority. Liberal theory does not discuss these differences with its claim that the idea of rationality is universal. Same with the problem of rational choice theory, that it says that everyone is rational when everyone is not rational. So Walzer's critique can be considered a socially informed liberalism. Postmodernism is also a critique or a response to the hegemonic ideology and discourse of liberalism. Michel Foucault defines discourses as linguistic linguistic structures that condition not only our views of the world but also our self-understandings, how we see our place in the world, and what we see to be the opportunities and choices available to us. It treats liberalism as a discourse, or the dominant discourse in recent human history, that has pervaded human lives and systems. Like capitalism and democracy. Discourses like liberalism are regimes of truth, which are basically expressions of power as they are claims to truth, because they say that liberalism or capitalism is the only viable system or ideology that we need and have in this world. So this is evident in liberalism's claim to universality. Foucault's work is structuralist as it looks at how individual action or perception or views are determined by the structure, in this case, discourses. So Rorty also critiques liberalism's claim to universality, noting that beliefs are contingent. Liberalism is not and does not have to claim that it is universal to be valid. Cultural frameworks determine the idea of self, as conceptions of the individual are always products of a particular culture and should be understood as such. So there you have it, the ideas of liberalism and the critiques to liberalism. So for your paper, to try to explore what ideas in this presentation resonate with you the most. Like, what do you think do we need to do in our political and social institutions? Do we do it like Rawls said, that we need to rethink our social conception or our idea of justice so that we could have a more equal society? What is the image or what is the shape of that kind of equal society? Is it aligned with the vision of liberalism, where everybody has liberty, has freedom, and are equal to pursue their own choices because they are rational and could decide what is best for them? Or is it aligned with communitarianism's idea that we should aim for the betterment of our communities because this is where we get our values, and we should not discount that when we think about our political and social institutions, right? So, or is it the rather radical critique of the other theorists in postmodernism? So I'll leave you to think about this, and we will discuss this in our last meeting for the course. Thank you.